So while we're waiting for everyone to come up, I'll go ahead and start and share some things from our breakout sessions. And I guess the first thing that I'd like to say is just a huge compliment to the students. Yeah, you guys are amazing. And I'm sure great in all the sessions. In my breakout session, I was inspired. I thought the students in particular, everyone, but the students in particular were insightful and creative and confident, and they had fresh ideas, and that they were aware of what was going on. They wanted to make a difference, and that's the most amazing thing that I'm taking away from this, without a doubt. And I wanted to share, I guess, to summarize the breakout sessions that I led. I'll focus just kind of on the action step part of the questions that we asked, and because these came a lot from our students, and they're really exciting. And I think the first was, what I wrote down here just in listening to the students is that our students are the solution, without a doubt. That as you develop more self-esteem and self-confidence, you speak up to your peers, you speak up to the problems as you see them. And we listed all sorts of different positive action steps. One starting, with the way the media reports, that we should have positive news stories out there that are reflecting on the good things our students and all diverse individuals are doing in the community to make a difference. We talked about how teachers at both the high school and the college level need to be having these conversations, because they weren't. And that was the feedback that our group gave, is that they're not having these conversations, at least not bigger, more meaningful conversations. So we need to have this to help break stereotypes about race, to be talking about it on a regular basis. But similar to a lot of the training that everyone behind me went through, we need to make sure that people are trained and they know how to have these discussions too. So events like this, we thought were really important, just to be able to start talking about it. But so more assemblies, more courses, and things that emphasize the idea that it's okay to be you, no matter what the color of your skin is, no matter what your hair is like, no matter what shade of skin color you have, or how you even communicate or talk among your peers and your professionals, that it is okay to be you. And ultimately, let's get our students leading events like this with their peers to make a difference. Those are just some of the things from my breakout sessions, but I left really inspired, and I want to thank all of you.
Hello. The students, my session was absolutely wonderful. The students were amazing. Some of the things that they shared, they felt like it was a lack of diversity in the teaching ranks. And the next steps for that is that we could target recruiting teachers, especially from HBCUs, which are historically black colleges and universities. Also, students brought up the problem with content. They felt like some of the, curriculum with the fine arts departments, they were lacking. They also mentioned that in, a school that there is a problem with, like, they have a music class. I can't think of what they called it. What did you guys call it? Music recording tech, and there's a class they just come to. There's no technology. They do nothing there. That's a problem. They felt like, and along with a Black history curriculum that they mentioned, they felt like that we need to actively recruit minorities, actively recruit teachers even that can teach these courses and have a vested interest in them learning. Also, they felt like it was a lack of diversity in government. That teachers, instructors, professors should not assume that minority students learn at a slower pace. That teachers, that systems, that we need systems in place that hold teachers accountable for acting on these assumptions. There was so much. I don't even know if I had time, but the other thing was also don't assume that all students come with the same experiences, that we need to avoid a one-size-fits-all mentality, that bullying has effects, and that it can hinder performance in the classroom. And I guess I'll end there, but there was so much, and they felt like these discussions need to continue. And one highlight was ignorance begets more ignorance, that we need to confront things, we need to speak up in the moment and take a stand.
Good morning, everyone. So in our group, we actually discussed a little bit of everything that ties into this big picture of oppression and systems. And so one of the things we talked about when we discussed race was parental involvement in the schools. It was brought up, and one example that was shared that happens way too frequently is that in the schools, you many times have this upset white parent, and then you have this upset African American parent, most of the times upset over the same thing, but then that white parent is understood, and that African American parent is seen as conflictive. Now, in these situations, one of the things we talked about was how do we equip the schools, the staff, to treat people in a better way, in an equal way. Because a lot of times when people are seen as conflictive, even though it's the same issues all across, this leads to inaction or negative outcomes for the student and also for the parent. So the recommendation is to just really put greater effort on equipping our staff at the schools at all levels to build on those communication skills and to really teach that, them to make that effort to be more understanding of the barriers or challenges that our parents are facing. Also, that it was very important for leadership to break those walls that exist and to be more approachable so that parents really feel like they can speak up and that they don't feel like they're going to be seen as conflictive. The second thing that we talked about in kind of like this greater scheme is that students, it came more from the student perspective, that they don't feel like they have sufficient time with their counselors when they're setting their school schedules. Thus, they recognized during this session that this could put them at a long-term disadvantage. So they shared that the process for creating their school schedules is very quick, and they really don't get the opportunity to understand their options. We all know these are options that could definitely impact their futures. So as we learned, equity is about being fair and having equal access to opportunity. In education, equity requires that we create conditions that eliminate obstacles to these opportunities. The main issue is that this very well could be a colorblind system. And as such, it can be said that it does not work to eliminate obstacles to opportunities. A Peoria Public School staff person in our group did say that there are awareness over these issues, which is good, and that there are plans to try to figure out how to assist students better in utilizing systems like Cello. I think I'm saying that wrong. But additional comments were made that really there needs to be a focus on advising at an earlier stage, mentorship, both at the high school level and the college level. And then one of our students, which was very interesting, I think, to our group, said his priority number one was leaving Peoria after high school graduation. And so it made us talk about how do we invest in our community? How do we invest in our youth so that they want to stay, that they want to be the future, as we talked about, manual graduates that have done great things, but in our community, so we can continue to grow and have all these great things and contributions to make our community better. We talked about so many things that I know I'm going to get kicked off the stage for if I take too long. But some of the other important things were children raising children and how do we equip them. And then also, we talked about the textbooks and then making them, America is made of so many cultures. How do we include everything else so that way everybody has a wide spectrum of education over everything that goes on in this country? Lastly, I did want to say that I give kudos to everyone. I give kudos to all the students for speaking up, for using their voice and saying and giving their opinions. We are here together, and together is how change happens. So I hope we can continue a lot of these discussions.
Hello. So our group had a mix of students from Peoria Public Schools, faculty, and administration, and it was a good chance for all of those people to communicate with each other. The students especially expressed a frustration with not having a safe space throughout their school day to actually talk about these issues. So the students really expressed that they enjoyed these talks because in their school day, they don't ever get a chance to talk about these things. Their teachers tell them they don't have the time. One of our students said a teacher told her it was above her pay grade. So it was, and then administration got to address that, and we talked about how we can change the way the school day is structured. Administration expressed, we need to revamp the curriculum. We need to provide teacher training because these teachers may not have cultural bias training. They may not know how to talk about this themselves. So there is the administration really stressed the importance of providing training for teachers, structuring it actually into the school day, because the students want to have these conversations, but they're not encouraged to, or they're told this is not the appropriate time to do that. So the action steps we came up with are providing the trainings, structuring it into the school day, and just giving students a safe space to have those conversations. Thank you.
Good afternoon. In our session, I was really grateful of the conversations that came out. I believe that when we challenged ourselves to ask for what action steps do we want to take forward, what can we do, I appreciated all the input. What I heard very just summarily was that we need more of this, more places, more spaces for these summits. Specifically, the instructors and staff and students from Peoria Public Schools say that they want this there. They want it for just teachers, they want one for just administration, just students. Also, mixed places where people can talk to other people of different cultures, Dunlap teachers being able to talk to manual teachers, have everyone come together and discuss these things in safe places. So more of this, more training for self-awareness, similar to the TED Talk we saw yesterday as we left. More opportunities for cross-cultural experiences at every level. So more. This needs to be the beginning of the conversation, not the end. No.
In our group, we attempted to narrow down our topics to 3, despite many that we could have covered. And we came down with 3 main topics. Those are power, teacher skill sets, and going beyond access. First of all, power. We often talk about power in a very negative way, and we need to flip that to how we can leverage power in a positive way. There is great power in making incremental change, and if you have white privilege, you should be using it for incremental change. 2, teacher skill sets. We all know we have an abundance of young white female teachers in our schools. We seriously need representation of teachers who look like the students they are teaching. That's the first part. Second part of teacher skill sets is that we need to start treating the privilege of teaching as a professional occupation with a very specific skill set that not everyone has, and take very seriously the people we are leaving our children with, including the potential for trauma inflicted by unconscious and conscious bias in the classroom. Number 3, going beyond access. We talked about what are we doing to overcome barriers to students once they actually are in college, and how important it is to focus on not necessarily the skill sets and readiness to learn of the students we might wish we have, but rather the skill sets and readiness to learn of the students that we truly do have. And examples we discussed in the group were the extremely high cost of textbooks, The lack of personal or computer and technology access, despite that being assumed, everybody has it today, which is not true. And the flexibility or lack thereof of teaching expectations and methods.
I thought our workshops went really well. I really enjoyed the participation from everybody. We didn't have to force anybody to get involved. Everybody had great dialogue. I was very impressed by the students that we had. They were very open, very energetic, and just hearing the different experiences that they have faced throughout their lifetime, it just reminded me so much of certain things that I've gone through. So it just let me know that a lot of things haven't changed, even though in some aspects we've gotten better, but it just shows that social injustice and equity is so powerful and needed in our communities, in our schools, in our everyday lives. I think the biggest thing that we realized when we came out of the workshop is that it's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it can't just stop here. The discussion was great, identifying the problems and issues, but what we're going to do at this point. And I think the action plan is what's very necessary, and I think that's what our group is, very anxious to do, is to, bring an action plan forth, but coming together of course, Peoria Public Schools and ICC, that we can come together and provide the resources for our students and for our people, that we can make our education system much better and make it a better place.
Hi, good afternoon. A lot of my colleagues have already said a lot of the things we talked about in our breakout session. We had a wonderful group, wonderful discussion. I think the one thing I would add is about equity. There was a really good example of equity, and I'll just use the analogy that this student gave, was that if you have people looking over a fence, but everybody can't look over that fence, and maybe you have some taller people that are able to look over, but maybe you have some shorter people that can't, and they need a box to stand on in order to look over that fence. And so that box, if we talk about equity, is very similar to that. You wouldn't take away the box so that they could look over. They just need the box. And so we have to realize that some people need the box. Okay, so thought that was a really good example. Some other things that were mentioned were the voting. I remember that was part of the discussion yesterday as well, the panel discussion, the power of voting. And another comment I would add was the dividing line of Forest Hill. Some mentioned that those schools that are north of Forest Hill get textbooks and get the money and get all of the resources that they need, but those schools south of Forest Hill also need to have that same amount of resources and textbooks and all of those things, that there should be equity in what they're getting. So that seemed to be one of kind of the main messages that my group talked about. Thank you.
In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over the same things, but I just wanted to point out that we had a very diverse group. It was wonderful, old, young, black, white students, and I just want to say we had the best students. It was really interesting because they were so vocal and just really insightful. It was amazing. It was so glad they were there. Everyone in the group was respectful, listened to one another, and it was the easiest group I've ever facilitated, and I've been teaching for years. Education was our key, too, probably 3/4 of the time, and many of the things that were brought up were our concern, too. The one thing that I wanted to say that hasn't been said was that education is both formal and informal, and that you need to be intentional, which is what's been brought up over and over. The other recommendation for action was to implement cultural sharing. There's a need to experience other cultures. Although we have individual festivals for different cultures, and we have Taste of Peoria here, which shares foods from different cultures, it was suggested to have a festival in Peoria of many different cultures so people could come and learn and experience the cultures in which they're not familiar. Food, dress, music, but bring it all together at once. That would be our suggestion. Thank you.
This is so weird because we also had the best students. I think our group would second a lot of the observations and recommendations of all the other groups. Our action step was realizing how much we'd learned from each other, I think, from the conversations. They were genuine, they were honest, they were respectful. There's a lot of listening, a lot of talking, and our action step is that we can be the leaders now. We can bring, all of us, what we learned over the last day and a half, and we can be the people who bring the message and the insight about colorblind racism and white supremacy and structures, institutional racism. We can help lead that conversation in our community and in our schools, and that would be our action item.
I did not. I'm here actually on behalf of Brian Asbury. He's one of our communications faculty, and he also facilitated a breakout session. He left 6 points that he wanted everyone to know about their session yesterday. Number one, this summit brought the appropriate people together to have important and promising conversations. The energy and conversations in the room were powerful and inspiring. This is a strong start, but the work must be continued. Number two, the room has a long list of action that needs to be completed, over 30 suggestions, but it requires coordinated efforts and collective collaboration. Perhaps in addition to the future small group discussions we have planned, we can also plan to engage as large groups once again. Number three, we need to work to build relationships between key players, institutions, programs, and each other. Relationships for something that can change the climate of racism within our communities. Number four, we have to develop educational improvement plans that directly confront the root causes, injustices, and obstacles of racism. Education is the other tool we have to dismantle systemic and personal racism. Number five, we must continue to include young people in these discussions. This work is and will be their charge. We must educate, empower, and activate future generations. And it starts with giving them spaces to activate their own voices and articulate their own experiences. Our group discussed the possibility of a forum or a summit or a town hall exclusively for younger generations and students. And number six, on a side note, and you can hear Brian say this if you know this, I am taking off my objective lens of moderator and cannot remember the last time I was in a room with such smart discussion. Being a moderator and note taker in this room was personally humbling and professionally inspiring. Thank you to Jessica, Kate, and Rita for this opportunity. It was truly fulfilling. And I'm going to take a personal moment here. A number of you know that this is one little step that we might be able to do, something called the 21-Day Challenge. It comes from Eddie Moore Jr.'s website. It's an opportunity for us to build racial equity habits. So what do we do now? The simplest step forward, create change within ourselves. So we're starting this here at ICC on April 1st. If you're interested in participating, please email me. There's little papers out on the table, or you can come find me and talk to me. But this is also available for anyone outside of ICC as well. Just chat with me and I can send you the web link. It's a great opportunity for us just to start to work on this on our own and start to build our own vocabulary and our own conversation in this continued work. Thanks.